Wells Fargo Place in the St. Paul Skyway. All 3 shops are equipped to help with your watch and cell phone repair needs on-site, while all jewelry, computer, and game consoles will be completed at the Mall of America store. Please bring us your repair challenges, and don't forget to mention the Talk North podcast for a 10% discount on all of our services.
Okay, so starting big picture from Jackson Purdy, what do you think Leopold regrets more, hiring Paul Fenton or firing Chuck Fletcher?
Hiring Fenton. I mean, look, Chuck, 9 years here. 3 straight playoff losses. Say what you want about the Fenton trades. The reality is that Zucker, Granlund, not Granlund, Zucker, Niederreiter, and Coyle were coming off a playoffs where they didn't have a point. It was just time to make a change. But you got to hire the right guy, and he hired the wrong guy. I mean, there's no doubt about it. So I would say I know for a fact it was hiring Fenton.
Absolutely. From James, he's account for hockey on Twitter. How badly does Boudreau want to coach the Leafs?
I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of appetizing teams right out there right now for Boudreau to want to coach. Right now, his biggest concern is getting this team out of this mess, but there's not much you could do.
From Alex Breitfelder, our turnover is a big issue for the team right now. It seems like they're not synced up at all on passes and zone changes, and that's as a non-hockey expert like myself, that's what I notice the most. Is it doesn't seem to be much cohesion between forwards and the D-men.
No, there's no cohesion. It's like everybody's just doing their own thing out there, and they're not dialed in at all, especially in their own zone. But you're right. I mean, look at that 4th goal last night. I mean, Brodin breaks his stick, and it's just like he didn't know what to do. First, he wanted to play the odd man rush. Then he wanted to go to the bench and grab a new stick. Then he sees Suter halfway over the boards. Instead of then going to the bench to allow Suter to make a change, he almost hits the brakes. Then he goes to the bench, and then by that point, Toronto's on a odd man rush the other way again, the top line, and it doesn't always seem like any time this happens, it's always against the top line guys of the other team. It's constant. These top lines that the Wild are facing every night just have to be salivating anytime they play Minnesota. It's got to change, or this is going to be a long year. I mean, some fans want it to be a long year, but it doesn't make it any easier to watch. That's for sure.
Well, I mean, let me ask the question that I'm sure 85 people are asking on Twitter right now: is does Bruce take the fall for this, even if it's not his fault? And if so, is that something they would do quickly? Is that something you give the team half a season to really evaluate?
Well, I mean, Billy Guerin wants to not fire him, and
right.
He has made it extremely clear. He gave him a vote of confidence to me at practice the other day. I wrote he gave a vote of confidence to Pierre LeBrun in a Q&A that he did for The Athletic yesterday. He, I believe, Ray Ferraro, I haven't listened to the podcast, but Billy Guerin did a podcast with Ray Ferraro and Darren Dreger yesterday where he gave him a vote of confidence. I read Ken Campbell from the Hockey News today, and Ken said Ken has Billy saying that he's got nothing to worry about. I'm going to do a podcast also with Billy tomorrow, same thing. The reality is he doesn't want to fire him. And to me, it makes no sense to fire him because, look, this team's going nowhere with the coaching change. So I hate to say it like this because everybody knows how much I respect Bruce. But if you're a new GM and you're going to watch this mayhem potentially for this year, why would you want to put your new coach? Say there was somebody out there right now that he wanted to hire. Why would you want to put him in place now? It's almost, I hate to say it like this, but it's almost like let Bruce go down with the ship the rest of the year. And then when his contract is up after the year, then you go and not only do you maybe hire your own guy then and you have a fair evaluation starting next year, but potentially, even if he has somebody in mind, there could be 3, 4, 5 other coaches suddenly available because, in a league where everybody gets fired, there could be a bunch of guys available next summer that aren't available now. So, and also on this team, it's not like there's an obvious interim coach here. There's obviously Dean Evison and Bob Woods here. There's Tim Army in the minors, but I don't know if Billy would want to go that route. So if you don't think that firing a coach is going to make this team a playoff contender, and Billy knows hockey, he knows this, he's got to know by now that this team isn't one. It makes no sense to fire him, in my opinion. Now that doesn't always matter. But all I can tell you is right now, I don't get the impression that he wants to make a change, and I just don't think it makes any sense whatsoever. I mean, you make a coaching change because you think that you're going to be able to magically fix this team. This team is woefully undermatched compared to a lot of teams in this league. They're not a cup contender. They're probably not even a playoff contender. So I don't know what the purposes of firing the coach right now would be.
Oh, I agree with you. It's just, as you know, in our business, that's the first question everybody asks you is when are they going to fire the coach? Well, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but it is the question that's going to be asked constantly.
And there's just, and if you haven't watched this team, it's like, Mike Harrington, who I respect a lot from the Buffalo News, tweeted out the other day saying that when's Bruce getting fired? This team has so much talent. And I almost wanted to call Mike today and say, Mike, just watch one Wild game before you tweet that again. Yeah. Because, the names you put are very talented players 5 years ago. But their kids are not going to be, the kids that they thought they were, I don't think. The Fialas, the Donatos, I mean, they're 22. I know that it's way too young, but I don't see top six game breakers with any of the young kids. And we are obviously seeing the tail end and backside of the career of a lot of veterans right now.
I'll bring up a positive note after we thank Tony Hoaglund, Hoaglund. If you call Tony, just Google him for all his information. If you call Tony, he will make a donation to Jason Zucker's foundation, and it will be matched by the National State Farm agent. And so, good cause, just for just making a call and seeing what Tony can offer you. When I talked to Tony about this, it was easy for both Michael and myself to use him as our insurance agent.
Hi, Talk North listeners. I wanted to let you all know about State Farm's new program called Quotes for Good. We partner with local nonprofits to raise money for great causes. For the Russo-Souhan Show, I'll be donating $16 to the Jason and Carly Zucker Give 16 campaign that benefits the University of Minnesota Masonic Children's Hospital. When you call in, be sure to mention the show so that we can track the donations. You can reach us at 763-421-4900 or check out our website at champlininsurance.com.
At least, Michael, we have the Victor Rask breakout moment.
Yeah, and I don't know if he'll play tomorrow. I really don't against Montreal. He was good the other night. Last night, like everybody, wasn't as good. But Fiala's getting back in against Montreal, and Bruce said today that Mayhew's playing. So the question is somebody hurt or who's coming out of the lineup? And, if you sit, the problem is Zuccarello's on the trip. So if you sit Rask, then you either got to put Cunnin back at center or you've got to put Donato or Greenway at center. Or Rask stays in and maybe you take a guy like Greenway out. He hasn't had his chance to be out yet. And I don't think he's playing overly great. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens when we get to the rink tomorrow. But, Rask still is who he is. I mean, that was a great play for him the other day in a lot of ways. I hate to say it because he didn't have to skate. Right. I mean, it was just a really good alert. He's a smart hockey player and he's got a great shot, but skating is what makes him very ineffective at the NHL level. And he did a good job on the forecheck, but even on around the corner, I mean, he actually lost the puck and sort of lost the battle, but luckily Greenway kind of intercepted it. And then what happened is the puck got spurred scored into the middle, and he reached for it and got the puck, and all he had to do was turn, and he nonchalantly sniped it. It was a great play, but still, last night in the skating game, he was not very good.
Right. From our friend Luke Cahill on Twitter, we might have already covered this, but I wanted to give Luke a shot here. Inconsistencies make sense due to having younger players. Who deserves blame for lack of flow and playing with speed? Bruce, assistants, players. I think you've already answered that. It's players.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, it's a team effort. I mean, you can, everybody deserves blame, from coaches to the players, but right now, I mean, as Luke said, I mean, they don't don't have a lot of fluidity to their game. It's there are times, and this is my concern. I mean, what Wild fans saw in the first period is how the Wild have to play 60 minutes a night to win on an every single game nightly basis, and I just don't know if it's in them if it's sustainable over 60 minutes for them to do it that way, because the veterans don't want to commit to it, and but they've got to realize their inefficiencies. Every single night. I mean, you hear Stahl, you hear Parise, you hear Dudnik, all these guys saying, for whatever reason, it's just not coming together. The hardest thing sometimes for veterans to admit is just when their game's fallen off here. And right now, they've got to look in the mirror and realize, look, they cannot go up against Austin Matthews or John Tavares or Mitch Marner or William Nylander and be successful on a nightly basis unless they're going to play a certain style of hockey. And it's a hard style of hockey to play because it's not exactly fun. It's a grind. Getting pucks deep, going in there and battling and checking. It's not a great, fun way for veterans to play. And last night we saw what happens when they get out of that way. They were able to do it for 20 minutes, and then it was just that was it. They couldn't again.
Absolutely. From Greg on Twitter, last week you mentioned how you don't believe the Wild will make the playoffs and that they still shouldn't tank. If they're really as uncompetitive as they seem, wouldn't it be better to try and improve their draft position? It's basically the same old question. And as we're saying, right now there's no doubt they're trying to win, and they have no chance of winning. So I don't think you have to intentionally tank. And the question is, I guess the philosophical question is, if they're going to be this bad, is there anything they would or should do to ensure that they end up with a high draft pick?
Well, I mean, look, I don't know what I said last week, but all I can tell you is what I believe and what I probably meant to say if it wasn't clear is if you thought that I said that they shouldn't tank, what I was saying is that there's no such thing as tanking anymore. One, it's impossible to tank and assure yourself of the number one overall pick because every non-playoff team has a chance of that. We just saw it this past year with the Rangers and Chicago and all these teams that weren't even close to the bottom that still, jumped up to get top draft picks. So tanking assures you of nothing. And two, my point is on rebuilds is that it's impossible to do with this type of roster because the guys that you can only move are the ones that are either young and don't have a lot of salary, or the Brodins of the world. The veterans are not movable. I mean, they just signed Zuccarello to a $30 million deal. You think somebody's taking that right now off their hands? The way that Zach Parise is playing right now, it's not going to be easy to move him, even though I think, as I've said consistently all summer long, he was given a great opportunity to go somewhere that was a good situation, that he would almost assuredly waive his no trade. But who's taking him right now? The way that he's playing, these guys are being scouted every single night. So that was the other thing is that if you wanted a rebuild here, the guys to trade for a rebuild would have been the Coyles and the Granlunds and the Niederreiters, but they were given away essentially for nothing. And that's a major problem. There were no futures that came with them. It was a flawed plan. And now all of a sudden the guys that you could have traded for a bunch of futures, prospects, picks, things like that are no longer available to trade. So now, which is scarier, is that Bill Guerin really has to analyze all the young kids on the team and whether or not they're the ones that you have to move. And then, that's always scary because you could put them in another situation, another team, and have them break out there. And you're kind of beating yourself up because you just gave away Kevin Fiala for futures. So it's not an easy situation right now. And this is what I mean is that Bill Guerin's got a huge task ahead of him here to truly try to analyze exactly what to do with this roster because it's going to take time to get this team on par with everybody. This has been. Look, in a lot of ways, they're paying the piper for years of Chuck Fletcher trying to win now. That was Craig Leopold's edict for him. He was always trading futures to try to win now. I think the downfall of this team really started with the Hansel trade. The Wild lost their way. They traded a first and a second for a guy that should never been acquired by Chuck Fletcher. That is on him. It was just a horrendous trade for Hansel. And it's really started there where this team, that year against St. Louis, that was a beatable. That was the year that they should have won, and they just did not.
And I'll go back to that moment in time, and I thought they needed another I thought they needed somebody like Hansel. The day they traded for him, we're both working at the Star Tribune together. I thought it was a good deal, and you thought it was a bad deal, and of course, you ended up being very right about that.
Well, I mean, I've never been a Hansel guy, and the other thing that I didn't like